And because we want to practice language justice, I'm going to go ahead and provide these instructions in Spanish first, and then I'll come back and just repeat them all in English. Hola a todos, gracias por tenerme aquí con ustedes. Mi nombre es Alejandro Arrieta, seré el intérprete de el español el día de hoy. Y como queremos practicar la justicia del lenguaje, verán que estaremos usando varias herramientas para que tengan acceso al idioma de su preferencia, si entre el inglés y el español. En la parte de arriba de su pantalla verán una opción de seleccionar la presentación en inglés o en español para que sigan en el idioma de su preferencia. Y cuando se trata del audio, después de que repita estas instrucciones en inglés, van a ver un icono terráqueo aparecer a mano derecha en la parte de abajo en su pantalla. Asegúrense de abrir ese icono y así como ven en su pantalla, van a abrir ese icono y van a poder seleccionar el español y si es necesario pueden poner el audio original en silencio. Voy a repetir esto en inglés y después vamos a comenzar. All right, thank you for your patience as I provided instructions in Spanish. And as I was mentioning, we want to practice language justice as much as possible in this space, and you'll see that we'll be using a couple of tools to make that happen. One of them is that at the top portion of your screen, you'll see the option to select the presentation in English or in Spanish. You can follow along in whichever language you prefer. And we also have interpretation. As you can see here on the slide on your screen, you're going to see after these instructions, you're going to see a globe icon appear on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Once that pops up, make sure you go ahead and click on it and select English as your preferred language. And if you find it necessary, you can always hit mute original audio. And with that, I'll pass it over to our hosts to get us started. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Alejandro. So we will be turning interpretation on momentarily. So I'm going to wait for that just so Gerardo can also, so Alejandro can also interpretate. Oh, okay, there we go. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Megan Stansel and I run the Certifiably Green Denver program. We work with businesses in Denver to help them reduce their environmental impacts. And so we have put on this webinar series. This will be the last of the series, which really just help our businesses understand how they can become more sustainable and learn about opportunities available to you as well as best practices. Just to note, all webinars and slide decks will be posted on our website. And so with that, I would like to introduce our presenter, Lesly Baesens. Lesly is the Food Waste Program Administrator for Denver's Department of Public Health and Environment. So she is our food waste expert and guru and here today to help us go beyond waste diversion and really understand how to reduce our food waste that would otherwise get discarded. All right, I'll let you take over, Lesly.
Thank you so much.
Hey y'all, I think we're only sharing the presentation in Spanish. Oh, there we go.
I'm sharing now.
Perfect.
Great. Okie dokie. All right, good morning. I'm excited to be here. It's not very often that I get to do a presentation for the business community. I often talk to our residents. And so I was very excited to be asked to present for you all today. And it kind of got me to think a little bit differently about, what I usually tell people and really tailor this to how, finding new ways for you to reduce food waste in your operations. But before we get into that, I'm going to give you some food waste facts through a little quiz format. I invite you to put your responses in the chat. And then I'll tell you a bit about what Denver has been doing to tackle food waste. And then we'll go into, what you can do to reduce food waste into your operations. And I have it set up so that it will be relevant for a variety of businesses. Okay, so the question is, 1 year of wasted food produces the greenhouse gas equivalent of how many coal-fired power plants? Is it 6, 11, 31, or 42? And if you would please put your answers in the chat. And I'll be kind of seeing what you all are saying before I give you the answer. Okay, so 31, 11. I'll give you like a few. Julia, I know Julia, of course, Julia knows the right answer. Julia's going to know the right answer to every question because she works on food waste also. So yeah, Julia posted the right answer, and so did Spencer. So the right answer is 42. And so this is where this data comes from. It comes from the US EPA. They released a report just recently on kind of all the impacts of food waste. And I think something that's important to keep in mind and that a lot of people don't think about is that when you're wasting food, you're really wasting all of the labor, the water, the energy, the land that went into the process of growing, harvesting, transporting, refrigerating, cooking, storing that food. And so all that waste really adds up during the life of the food. And we don't often think about that because, we purchase the item and that whole lifespan behind that food item is completely lost on us. And so this is where that huge waste of CO2, of greenhouse gas emissions really comes from, is that whole lifespan and everything that's lost along the way when we put food in the trash. So as you can see from the slide and from what the US EPA calculated, it's enough water and energy to supply more than 50 million homes. And I think just putting these numbers kind of in these terms is really eye-opening because, again, we often don't think of food as being an issue at all. We don't think of food as having any relationship to climate. And so, yeah, I think this really puts it into terms that are very concrete and really help us understand the impact that wasting food has. My next question, how long does it take for lettuce to decompose in the landfill? 2.5 weeks, 2.5 months, 2.5 years, 25 years. And again, I'll be monitoring the chat. And don't worry, Julia, you can't answer the question. I was really just kidding. Okay. Let's see, 2.5 months, 2.5 years. I'm gonna give it 2 more seconds. Okay. And the answer is 25 years, which I don't think anybody gave that answer. And I see somebody's saying something about the audio. Can you not hear me well? Megan, can you hear me?
Leslie, I can hear you well.
Okay.
But yes, the PowerPoint isn't currently available to download, but we will be posting it after this webinar.
Okay, great. So let me walk you through that 25-year figure because it's not what you would expect. Okay, so I'm going to try to speak slower. So essentially, when you're putting food in the landfill, the reason it takes a really long time to decompose is because there is no oxygen to go through that decomposition process. So it's essentially the process that would happen really quickly in your compost bin because there's oxygens and microbes and all of that takes forever in the landfill because landfills are designed to keep things in. So they get capped with different layers of materials so that things don't escape the landfill. And so these food items take a really long time to decompose. And when they do so, they release methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And how we know food takes so long to decompose in the landfill is because there's actually a branch of science called garbology. I promise you this is real, where folks are actually going through the landfill and trying to date the various food items they look for other things too, but by looking for like a newspaper or a letter or something that next to that food that will allow them to determine when the food was put in the trash. So in the case of the lettuce, it's an example that you see often when you're like working in this field. I was recently looking exactly where that source was, and it's from a book, which I think is actually called Garbology. And so the gentleman who wrote the book found this head of lettuce intact in the landfill, and it was 25 years old. And again, it hadn't even decomposed. So the process is presumably longer than 25 years. I have other examples. I had a colleague who worked in Boulder, and Boulder there was a person on staff or a consultant that was also looking through the landfill, found a carrot from the 1970s that he was totally able to identify because it hadn't decomposed. So food does not belong in the landfill. And food doesn't belong, it doesn't belong in the trash, and certainly edible food does not even belong in composting. We should be making every effort to eat and consume or repurpose all edible food. So this little reverse pyramid that's right here shows you the preferred way to deal with surplus food. So prevention is first, and that's really what I focus on at the City and County of Denver. Then food rescue, so getting that wholesome surplus food to people in need, industrial uses, and then as you can see, composting is second to last. Of course, there will always be food that we cannot consume, like bones and things like that. So those should go absolutely in the compost and not in the landfill. I have one more question for you all. I think one more. I may have another one somewhere else. Okay. The Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, a really large nonprofit, estimated the number of additional meals that could be rescued each year in Denver. What was their maximum estimate? Was it 1.5 million, 4.5 million, 4.9 million, 7.1, or 9.8? And again, I'll look for your responses in the chat. Okay, I see one guess of 4.9. Anybody else wants to venture to guess 7.1? Anyone else? All right, well, I'll give it to Spencer because that's actually the right answer. It's 7.1 million meals. So let me go into that a little bit deeper. So yes, NRDC, this big nonprofit, we are very lucky because they have done a whole bunch of research on food waste in Denver in all kinds of sectors, residential, but also in the business sector. And so they were kind of looking at, well, what is the untapped potential in terms of, how much food is currently being rescued, but how much more could we rescue? And they had two different scenarios, one that was ambitious, but kind of achievable, and one that was, if we were to ramp up what we're currently doing to catch that surplus food. And then they had a max scenario. And so in my question, I was asking about the max. And in that max scenario, they estimated we could rescue an additional 7.1 million meals. So that's the potential number of additional meals we could rescue. And their top sector where that could be captured was retail, hospitality, and then small retail grocery. All right, so let me move on. I'll talk to you a little bit about what Denver has been doing to tackle food waste. So last year, we partnered with a community organization to run focus groups. This was on the residential side because we work on residential and commercial, but we have been focusing a lot of our efforts recently on residential because that's where most of the food in Denver is currently wasted. So we partnered with community organization. They spoke to 68 residents, mostly in our lower income communities. A lot of these residents were also getting food from food banks and food pantries. And so we wanted to hear from them. What are your challenges? Like, do you find yourself wasting food? Why do you waste food? How can we help you waste less food? And so we released this report as an image of the cover here on this slide. It's available on our website, but essentially what it confirms is what we already suspected and we knew from different studies that have been done, is that food is wasted across income levels. So it's not only that people have easier access to food, waste food, it's wasted across income level just for different reasons. So people have different challenges. It may be that they have difficulty accessing food. So when they go to the grocery store, maybe only every other week. And so they have to, they have to over purchase because they know they're not going to be able to get there again soon. And so a lot of that food gets wasted. There's also sometimes a fear of missing out and of running out of food. So tendencies to over purchase or get more food than is needed at like a food bank or a food pantry. So based on the input from these residents, we designed a campaign. I will go over that in just a couple slides. But something else we did is we released this best practice guide. It's really just a one-pager for our food banks and food pantries, kind of letting them know what we heard from our residents and from pantry users and how they could best, to the best of their ability, because they have their own challenges, match the food that's being offered to residents. Because something we heard is it can be difficult for residents to access food that's culturally relevant. So they may get a food item that they literally don't know what it is or what to do with. And so these food items tend to get wasted, which is a real shame because, of course, that food would be much better served like actually feeding our residents. So back to what we did in terms of what we heard from our residents. So we conducted a behavior change campaign. This was earlier this year. It targeted, of course, my cat with impeccable timing is meowing in the background. So we targeted 1,000 residents in Southwest Denver. And these residents were completely picked at random. So they did not know they were part of this campaign. They just one day received a set of materials at the doorstep. And so the materials were bilingual, English and Spanish. And this is kind of what they looked like. So on the left, you can see there was a sticker that says, "Eat this first." It was affixed on a bin. And I'll show you a picture of the bin in just the next slide. And the purpose of that was to just give them a place in their fridge to put food that they should consume in priority. This is usually people who have larger families find this helpful because you may have one person in the household that's responsible for producing the food, but then you may have kids or teenagers that may go in the fridge and not really know what they should be eating. So that can be placed in that bin. We had a one-pager that's on the right with some basic resources to reduce food waste. Here is a picture of those bins and what they look like, and they were dropped off in that tote bag. And then we also gave out a magnet with English and Spanish tips on storage, food storage, because that's something that was a concern for residents. Is like they didn't know how to store certain food items, your usual suspects, or like leafy greens, the stuff that usually tends to go bad in your fridge quickest. So on the retail side, we started this work in 2019. We ran a restaurant challenge with 3 neighborhoods in Denver. Each neighborhood was at a different time. The last challenge was in early 2020, right before the pandemic hit. So yes, we ran a restaurant challenge. Some of what we heard and what's relevant and what we're trying to work on is, well, as of 2016, as you can see on the slide, liability concerns were still cited by 50% of restaurants as a barrier to donation. So fear of being sued. There's a law in the book that's been in effect for, I think, close to 40 years that you're not held liable for food donated in good faith. And then most recent studies showing that 98% of food in restaurants is discarded. Obviously, some of that can't be donated, but only 2% is donated. And we know from that NRDC study I mentioned that that potential can be really high. So I mentioned the restaurant challenge. This is where that additional question I had for you is coming. So what was the potential for diversion during the 2019 restaurant food waste pilot? And what I mean by diversion is of everything that was discarded by these businesses, how much of that could have either been composted or recycled? And so your options are there, 40%, 65, 80, or 90. So what was the potential for compost or recycling? I'll let you put your answers in the chat again. I see Spencer says 90%, 90, 80. This cat's out of control. Okay. Spencer's on fire. I feel like Spencer's been giving every right answer. So the answer is 90. So yes, of everything that was discarded. So staff actually conducted waste audits. And so we literally looked through these businesses' trash and like sorted everything. And oh my God, I don't know if the cat can be heard. He will soon be more quiet, I promise. It just has to make himself known. So yeah, 90% was either compostable or recyclable. And here are some pictures of what we found in some restaurants' trash, which I think was enlightening. And some of the food that is shown here could have been donated, like you see Brussels sprouts. They were like totally fine. Some of it could have been reused for other purposes, like these. I think it looks like cilantro stems, the ends of prosciutto, things like that. So what we've been doing since, we haven't done any new restaurant challenges, although Megan and I have been talking about and trying to find funding to maybe reboot that. But we've been engaging restaurants in donation through a campaign that we're doing with our food safety investigators. So these are the folks, if you're in the restaurant industry, I'm sure you know them quite well. There can be a little bit scary, but these are people that will come to your restaurant to, assess the safety of your operations. So we thought they would be great spokespeople for this because, as I showed you a few slides ago, many restaurants still are afraid to be held liable. Restaurants and other food producing businesses are still afraid to be held liable for donating food. So we thought, who better to debunk that myth than our food safety inspector. So they've been handing out these postcards that have very pared down information, so it's not too overwhelming. On the back, it's in Spanish also, and you can scan the QR code to learn more. We're working with We Don't Waste, of which Julia, that I've been teasing so much, is one of the wonderful staff people to partner in this, to be a partner in donation for this. But so yes, businesses have been getting this postcard that very clearly states that donors are protected from liability. And then for restaurants who would like to show who are proud of donating, they also have the option of putting this cling in their windows, saying that they're a partner of donation and donate extra meals to the community. So let me now move on to what you can do to reduce food waste. Okay, so here are 3 pictures. What do you think all of these items may have in common? I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it. And essentially, all of these food items were made with food that would otherwise have been wasted. So the alcohol on the top right, it's limoncello. It was made with citrus peel that, from bartending operations, etc. And that the restaurant that makes the limoncello, it's a fine dining establishment in Washington, D.C., which is where I moved from. They are selling that alcohol for, I don't even know how much these days, but at the time it was like $12 a glass or something like that. So this is just to kind of show you the potential of food that we may think of as waste and how much it can actually bring in revenue. And here's some menus. It's a little bit hard to see, but these are 2 restaurants that were taking part in a little challenge that Washington, D.C. was organizing every year, in which restaurants had the option of thinking through some new menu items that they could produce based on food that they usually discard. And then there was an event where the general public could go to these restaurants and taste these items. And I just wanted to highlight, so on the right, you can see that they were making a seafood charcuterie board that was selling for $27. So, and again, so I moved to Colorado 4 years ago, so this is at least 4 years old. And then on the restaurant on the left, that was really a champion for this cause. They had a whole little area of their menu called Trash or Treasure, where they were making different food items with stuff that they would usually waste. So that's, and it's to kind of think through what you could repurpose in your kitchen and what value add items you can add to your menus. And just to say one more thing, I shouldn't have moved on so quickly. We did in the last restaurant challenge that we did right before COVID that I mentioned. So it wasn't a food hall. I think it was called Broadway Market. Sadly, they did not recover from the pandemic. But it was like like different little food stalls. And we had an event to close out the restaurant challenge where each of the concepts in that food hall made a dish with an item that they would usually waste. So it was super fun. And we had, again, the general public come through and taste all these different dishes. Sadly, because they did not reopen after COVID, we were never able to know what the, like, you know, how many of these restaurants would have continued to produce these food items. But it's definitely something to think about for a next restaurant challenge. So as I already mentioned, another option besides value-added items is donate your surplus. As I said, you have peace of mind, you're protected from liability, you will do good for your community. There are tax benefits, so you can claim some tax deductions at the federal level. There are some partners, so We Don't Waste is one of them. I'm sure there are others, but they will actually give you a summary of the food that was donated, so you can very easily hand that on to your accountant to kind of do your taxes and all that, so that you know exactly what you donated in what quantity. So that keeps it super easy and simple. You can go on our website, denvergov.org/save the food, and you'll see save donation protocol. So, which is essentially the same, you know, following the same protocol if you're a food business that you already very well know, to keep food safe in your establishments. And then the food, your food donation partner may have additional requirements like labeling and things like that you can discuss with them. Track waste to reduce waste. So this is something that's becoming more and more common, but there are systems, two very well-known are called LeanPath and Winnow, that will actually use AI and different technologies to get you to weigh your food and kind of see, you know, how much you made, how much was sold, how much may have been overcooked, overproduced, things like that, and help streamline your ordering system. This is best because it can be pricey. So it's usually a good solution for larger entities like hotels, large catering, just large institutions in general. Businesses that use the system usually see a 7-to-1 return on investment. So for every dollar invested, there's a $7 return. And apparently the saving in food cost is 2 to 8% of the food cost. So that can really add up. And there's been some really amazing success stories from using some of these systems with large businesses like IKEA and some hotels saving just like huge amount of food from being wasted by using these systems and streamlining their operations. Finally, there's technology. So I don't know if you've heard of this app called Too Good To Go. It's really common in Europe. It's coming to the US. They've been expanding. It's actually, we have it in Denver. It just doesn't have a lot of businesses, but I'm hoping talking about it here may help promote it. So the concept is amazing. It's essentially, at the end of the day, you can put all your unsold items on this app for a discounted price. So let's say you're a bakery, and at the end of the day, you realize you have, 10 baguettes, 20 croissants, some cookies. You can make little bags of goodies. And so you put essentially a surprise bag on the app, and you put that for a discounted price, and you tell people, come pick it up between 5 and 6 p.m., whatever. And so folks will claim it on the app, and we'll just go pick up a bag of goodies. So I've done it in Denver for like cookies. So I got a surprise bag of cookies at a business downtown. There are a few businesses participating. It's really amazing when you have lots of offerings on the app, and that's where I think Denver could use a little more options. But in concept, it's really, really great. So I just wanted to mention that. And then if you work in an office and you don't need to use LeanPath or any of these apps, you still have some options for reducing food waste. And here I wanted to talk a little bit about what Denver has been doing to engage in food waste prevention in our offices. So one thing we have done is engage our staff in food waste prevention. So we run little contests, we give out prizes. I think it was last year we did for Food Waste Prevention Week, which is in April. We asked our staff to submit a photo of themselves with one food waste prevention tip. And then for staff who actually did that, we gave them some points toward our wellness program. So you can find whatever works as an incentive we had like over 50 submissions. And then our wonderful communication staff put them in these slides and posted them on social media. And so it was really a little fun challenge. Another things you can do, and this is getting more nitty-gritty, but kind of interesting, is if you have events at work, provide takeout containers for your staff at the end of the event. So we do that, and it's really great. So this week we had a taco bar, we had a staff meeting, and at the end of the taco bar, there was plenty of food left, and we gave out, and it was served. So of course we couldn't donate that because it was, out for public consumption, but we provided takeout boxes, and our staff took the food home. So we didn't waste it. I thought that was really cool. You can donate food that has not been put out. So let's say if we had some of this food for the taco bar, if some of it had been refrigerated and not served, that could have been donated. So this would kind of depend on the size of your operations. And then you can also put prevention in your sustainability policy. A lot of offices have sustainability policies. It could be reducing how much food you order for catered events, because again, there's usually a lot of surplus. It could be like, there's just a variety of things that you could do. I'm happy to help you think through that if you want to get in touch with me. But it could be putting in your sustainability policy that you will give out takeout containers to your staff to take food at the end of an event. So just kind of thinking through that in terms of food waste, and that can count towards, if you have climate change goals, that could totally count towards that, since as we've talked about, food waste is a contributor to climate change. So that is all I had for today. I have some quick resources here. So I've already mentioned denvergov.org/savethefood, LeanPath, website Winnow. So these systems that will help you with your, how much food you produce and waste. Too Good to Go, which I mentioned. And then I have this really obnoxiously long link, which bit.ly no longer is available without signing up. And I didn't want to sign up for another message, but it's essentially the link to the USDA website that shows you all the details of the Good Samaritan Act. So essentially the law that says that you're protected from liability. If you Google it, Good Samaritan Act, you can find it really easily, but you can kind of see what it is and provide reassurance to you or your staff that you can donate and not be held liable. So yeah, I'll leave it here and see if there's any questions. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. So we do have a couple. So could you please clarify on putting bones in the compost? So specifically, this person's experience is that most community gardens in the metro area will not allow meat, fats, and bones, really just only plant material. And a lot of the talk is that if you do put those animal products in the compost, it will attract rodents and other vermin. So could you give us a little clarification?
Yeah, so that will depend on your compost program. Like if you have your compost is being picked up by the city, or if you have a large private hauler, you can totally put bones and different animal products in the compost. If you do give it to a community garden, that's really totally up to what the community garden says they will accept. So it is, yes, it's entirely possible they do not take animal products, because it's, for bones and things like that, you really need the pile to get really hot in order to decompose that, which can sometimes not be achieved on a smaller scale. So yes, just ask. If they tell you they can't take it, then they can't take it. But yeah, something that I wanted to point out too is that Denver voters voted in the last election, so about a year ago, for Waste No More. It was a citizen-led ballot initiative that's going to require businesses to compost and recycle in the city and county of Denver. So all of these tips are now more relevant than ever, because if you did not have access to compost, or we're not offering compost or recycling, you will soon have to do that. Don't panic, you'll have time. It's all being worked out. The implementation plan will depend also on the size of businesses and how it's going to be rolled out. So that's still not finalized, but just know that it's coming. So I think this is a really good time to put in place different ways in which you can actually reduce how much surplus edible food is, I mean, going to be composted, and what are the alternative use you can have for that food.
Yes, and I would add to that too. Composting is a great way to divert waste, but ultimately, if we could do source reduction first, that is ultimately our goal and definitely Leslie's.
Yes.
So Leslie, actually just one note too, I have heard, and this is currently what I do with my bones after I boil them down for stock, is I bury them in my plant beds because they do provide a lot of good nutrients for your gardens. And I definitely don't have any vermin, but also have a dog and cats that run around. But that's also another option, is if you can bury them in your gardens, it's good for them. So next question, Leslie, what cities, if any, have you looked at as great examples or champions in circularity in food systems? And then more specifically, does Denver have a circular economy plan focused on food or any current public-private partnerships?
That's a good question. It has so many different components. So it kind of depends which part of it you're looking at. So as I mentioned, I'm really focused on prevention. So in terms of prevention, different cities do different things well. It's like, let me think, because some cities will just run like food waste prevention campaign at the resident level. Although at the city level, there isn't a ton. Hold on. Like Washington, D.C. has done it. There's been some counties that have also done like campaigns and ad campaigns. Less so in what we have piloted in Denver in terms of actually providing materials to residents. So that's a little bit newer. What a lot of cities have done instead and championing is more like composting type initiatives, which are not as prevention focused. In terms of businesses, Nashville, like Tennessee just in general, but Nashville and Memphis have done a lot. I think they were one of the first ones to do a restaurant challenge and engage their business sector that way, and also in engaging their food safety investigators in distributing materials. Of course, now there's also California has, and this is just the state generally, it's being implemented by localities. But California has a law in the book that I think became effective this year, in which food, like larger food operators must donate surplus food. So the cities are and counties, etc., are currently working out plans with different donor recipient agencies to get the surplus food from these businesses. So there's just little pockets of places that are doing different things depending on the type of sector we're talking about. But what I'm mostly seeing as a trend in terms of food waste is on the composting front, which is, it has its advantages because it's like Megan, we're just saying, we really need to be focusing on that prevention piece. But at the same time, the compost piece is also really important because we should still not put all that food in the landfill. It has no place in the landfill. So in terms of circularity, that I think Megan might be better able to answer because it's something that CASR is really been kind of working on and thinking about, the circularity of food. In my department in public health and environment, it's the prevention side that we're really working on these campaigns that I just mentioned. But I don't know, Megan, if you have anything that CASR specifically is working on in terms of the circularity. I mean, I know there's the initiative with the reusables and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say we are more focusing on waste diversion at this point. With our zero waste team, it is currently growing. So it is our hopes to really include food waste reduction into our circular efforts. I know that we do have a sustainable advisory council who is really interested in learning how we can prevent food waste. So these conversations are definitely happening, but I wouldn't say anything is currently at least in place at policy level, but it's definitely in talks. Okay, so next question, Leslie. So I work for an organization that isn't in food service, but we frequently order catering for events. So especially if we're thinking around the holidays and with people only in the office part-time, so working those hybrid schedules, there is some worry about food waste. Are there any strategies for food ordering for organizations in this situation, or any further tips on best practices to reduce waste?
So what we usually say, no, I don't know if there's any catering businesses on the call, and hopefully they're not going to be mad at me. But one best practice is to order 10% less food than what you think you'll need. Why? Because usually a lot of these catering businesses will actually built in an overage in what, so when you order food, they will actually built in a 10% more food to make sure you're not running out. The thing is, when have you ever run out of catered food? I've never seen that. Because usually people don't show up and the quantities are really large. So one thing you could do is order 10% less. Another one that would be best practice is, again, like getting your staff to take the food at the end of the event. So again, this is for food that's been served. If the food hasn't been served and has been kept refrigerated or, hasn't been touched, you can donate it. What we have also done in the office, let's say after staff has helped themselves and there's still a little bit left, we'll put in the fridge, in the staff fridge, and put just a sign on it with the date and a sign that says help yourselves, or free for all, or whatever it is, and send an email, and that will usually take care of it. I don't know, people are usually pretty happy to take some free food. So between a combination of these different things, you shouldn't have too much left over. But let me know if you've tried that and it hasn't worked for you, because I'm happy to help you brainstorm.
I would also recommend too, when you are catering, try to go for plated meals versus buffet style, because that will target specific people. So make sure you get that head count. That's definitely always a good best practice as well. So Leslie, specifically in your role, do you work one-on-one with restaurants to help them understand what their best option is to reduce food waste?
It's not something I have been asked. It's something I'd be willing to do if I were asked. I mean, of course, you and I have also worked on, what best practices a restaurant could put in place if they want to be part of Certifiably Green Denver. So, so the short answer is I haven't done it because I've not been asked to do it, but I'm more than happy to do it. Yeah, what I do is I will do presentations for businesses, but mostly for their staff on like food waste reduction. So it will look different from what I presented today and be more like geared towards what you can do at home to reduce food waste in terms of how you store food, how you prepare food, how you go grocery shopping, things like that.
Awesome. Yeah. And I would definitely piggyback off that if you do reach out to Certifiably Green Denver, most likely I will be in talks with Leslie to figure out what that best plan of action would be to reduce that food waste. Leslie, do you educate on food storage best practices? Say like what should be put in the fridge, freezer, left on the counter, etc.?
Yes. Yeah. So that was part of the magnets that I mentioned that we gave out for our residential campaign. Of course, there's only so much information we can put on a magnet without, and especially because it was bilingual, without it looking really overwhelming. But we kind of took the most frequently wasted items that residents told us about during our focus groups and put that on like storage tips on the magnet on that. So for example, in terms of like what you should put in the fridge and not on the counter, apples. Apples should be kept in the fridge. And it's something that people often don't know. And it's one of our most frequently wasted food item. I think the most frequently wasted at the residential level are chicken, milk, and there's one more thing, but apple is in the top 10. So yeah, things like that. And then we have because we couldn't fit everything we wanted on that little magnet, we had a QR code where people could get additional tips on proper storage. Yeah, for many more food items.
Awesome. That makes sense why your logo would be an apple. I admittedly do have an apple on my counter right now, so that is definitely good to know. Awesome. So next question, you mentioned working with residents. So this person is curious if that included homeowner associations. So are there any best practices for food prevention / waste for HOAs?
We haven't done HOAs yet, but it's probably gonna be coming. And it's not because we don't want to, it's because when we do these residential campaigns, it's usually been paired so far with waste audits. And so the waste audits are actually looking in people's trash to figure out, how much food is wasted, what types of food are wasted, depending on our budget, because these audits are really expensive. So sometimes we're just looking at the whole, and sometimes we're going a bit more granular. We can't do that if we work with a homeowner community, because usually in an HOA community, the waste is being picked up by a private hauler. So it would be like everything is combined. So then we don't have any rights to go in there and like look through the trash. But it's definitely something that I would like to do moving forward. I actually have money from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, so CDPHE, to do a residential campaign next year. So in which I have enough funds to target 2,000 residents. So as part of that, we'll probably be doing some apartment buildings, because we'll be doing waste audits, but you can't audit 2,000 people's trash. That would be, I can't even think about how much that would cost. That would kind of be insane. So we usually audit a subset. So we could do some individual houses, get be able to look through the waste, see how well the campaign is working, but still have enough to give out materials to HOA communities and apartment buildings.
So Leslie, do you have any recommendations or resources on how businesses can encourage their customers to reduce food waste, say with takeout leftovers? Specifically, like, do you think it'd be beneficial to educate customers on how to reheat the food, how long leftovers will be good for, etc.?
I love that question so much. So when we did the restaurant challenge that I keep referring to, we actually designed a whole bunch of collaterals for the participating restaurants for the general public. So we had table tents that were like essentially telling the customers that they were in a restaurant that participated in this challenge. Then we had these little cards that could be put in the takeout bags with more information. So if there is an appetite for this and a willingness to work on this, I'd be happy to think through some materials. I think there's huge value in doing that. There's also, when you look at some of the research that has been done in the surveys by like the National Restaurant Association and all these industry group, customers really like it. They like to know that the restaurant is working on this. There's more and more of an awareness around food waste. So people definitely like to know that the restaurant is working on food waste. And usually there is a receptiveness on the part of the customer to hear more about what they could do at home or how important it is for them to consume their leftovers. So yes, and yes, there's huge opportunity. And I think if and when we're able to do another restaurant challenge or more engagement in that sector, we'll probably be looking at these collaterals again and what can be supplied to the customers.
Awesome. Leslie, do you have specific programs geared toward lower income households? So for individuals and families who are food insecure, many may think waste is not a problem. So there might be room to educate and really implement behavior change.
Yeah, so all of the campaigns we did with residents were in lower income neighborhoods. And so the people that were part of our focus groups were all lower income residents. And they did say that they waste food and they wish they would waste less, but sometimes didn't know how or what to do. So this is where we listen to that input and to the food that's most frequently wasted in these households, which really tracks with the general trends. And like leafy greens and the herbs are really your main culprits. So providing these storage tip and that bin about eating this first, providing like targeting also the messaging around, since we noticed in our focus group that these like food insecure household had that fear of running out, the fact that if you by using these tools and managing your food, you'll always have food on hand, like make better use of your freezer, for example, so that you can that you'll have that food available and be able to save money. So yes, our materials were based on this feedback we heard from our lower income residents, and we launched them in lower income neighborhoods.
Thanks, Leslie. So I think if anybody else has any more questions, please do drop them in the chat. I think this might be the final one. And honestly, this is a personal question out of curiosity. So why does food not decompose as easily in landfills as they do in backyard composts?
Because in the landfill, there's no oxygen for the food to decompose. That's really what it boils down to. It's just, the environment is not designed for the food to decompose. It just, the landfill is at the end of I don't know if it's every day, but they just cap it. They usually put glass on top of the landfill, so there's just no air, and food really need air to decompose. That's really that's what it's all about.
Interesting. Okay, so we do have another question. Okay, so I think this is more so with reusable containers. This is an interesting question because I will say I keep a reusable to-go container in my car that I'm always bringing in, but I think this is more for takeouts. So in recent years, I have succeeded in getting some of the restaurants to offer recyclable containers, and even a few who will offer reusable containers for a small fee. So I guess the question is more so, for years I've taken in my own container and to pack leftovers, but some restaurants would not allow it. Are you seeing any hiccups with specifically more so, I think, reusable containers?
No, I know that technically for coffee shops, because I always bring my own thermal thing if I get a takeout coffee, so I don't have to get a mug. They are technically supposed to rinse it per health code. Does that happen? No. Do I care? No. So it's, I think it's just kind of like what the health department says and like what business are saying. I think I don't know that if you're packing your own food at the restaurant at your table in your own containers, I don't see how that's a health safety hazard. So I don't know that that would even be mentioned in the code. I think it's more so for items that make it in the back of the house where there's like, fear of like, well, what have you been doing with that container before you handed it out to like the barista, for example. I know this is more relevant for if you bring your own containers to a store for refill for food. I know there's health regulation around that. Same deal, they're supposed to rinse it or wash it, which of course is not realistic. But then whether or not the business decides to enforce that is just really up to that individual business and their risk tolerance. So I can't speak to that. But that's the first I hear of it. And yeah. And I know people who do it and bring their own takeout containers, and I've not heard it being a problem.
Yep, and Julia, I was just going to mention that too. We are lucky in Denver that we do have a reusable container service provider. So that is Deliver Zero. Also at the state level, we will be having a polystyrene ban, so we will no longer be seeing styrofoam as takeout containers. So at least there's that. And I do know there are people at the state level also working on really trying to understand like what kind of those policies and restrictions are behind bringing your own reusables into facilities. I know a lot of it, yeah, like if you bring it into the coffee, it's because it drips in, so nothing's like touching that container. But I would say, yeah, it would be a sad day for me if I went into a restaurant to collect my leftovers in my reusable container and they told me I couldn't. So yeah, sorry that that's happening, but luckily that polystyrene will be going away soon. So okay, I think Leslie, that might be all of the questions for now. I would say if anybody does have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Certifiably Green Denver, me or Leslie. We will definitely connect you to the right people and help you out as much as possible. So definitely.
I'm putting my email in the chat real quick.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. And
if
thank you
anybody wants to
for
reach out.
doing this webinar. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And we'll give you back 5 minutes of your day.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for your question. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Megan, and your team for the opportunity.
Awesome.